You updated your resume, you optimized it for the ATS, you learned prompt engineering, you even built a portfolio project, and then someone's college roommate's brother-in-law mentioned at a barbecue that there was an opening on his team. 3 weeks later, that person had the job. No application, no ATS, no AI screening, just a conversation and a handshake. Here's the number that should stop you cold. Up to 85% of jobs are filled through networking and referrals. Not through the job boards you've been refreshing every morning, not through the AI-screened applications you've been tailoring, through people knowing people. And in 2026, as AI automates more skills, more execution, more of the things we used to compete on, that number isn't going down, it's going up. This is Surviving AI with Carlo Thompson. And today we're talking about the one competitive advantage that artificial intelligence absolutely cannot replicate: your relationships. This is episode 16, The Relationship Economy.
Artificial. System online.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's really get into the reality of this because it's a profound shift we're looking at today.
Right. I mean, if you're listening to this on your commute, or maybe you're at the gym, like actively trying to burn off the anxiety of a brutal job hunt, you probably know the exact flavor of misery we're talking about today.
Oh, absolutely. The burnout is so real right now.
It really is. You're doing everything the internet tells you is right.
Right.
You're spending hours tweaking keywords. You're running your resume through those AI scanners to get that perfect algorithmic match score.
Hitting apply on 50 jobs a week.
Exactly. 50 a week. And your reward for all of that labor is just absolute deafening silence. It feels entirely broken.
Because it is broken. And, our mission for this deep dive is to prove that to you. We're going to dismantle that whole illusion of the modern application process.
And then importantly, we're giving you the tactical framework to just bypass it entirely. Joining you to synthesize the data on this is our resident strategist. Where are we pulling all this from today?
We're bringing in some massive definitive data sets to tear this apart. We're talking about a 20 million user mega study conducted by MIT and LinkedIn. Plus, we've got fresh 2026 applicant tracking system data and enterprise-level referral statistics.
Basically showing how the biggest companies on earth are actually sourcing talent right now.
Exactly. The core thesis you need to walk away with today is this: the front door to the job market is jammed shut. We're going to show you how to find, unlock, and just walk right through the side door.
Let's start right at that front door, actually. The whole illusion of the apply button. Because the frustration out there is just palpable.
A wall of frustration.
I talk to so many incredibly talented, highly qualified people who are just exhausted. They send 100 resumes into the void, and what do they get? Maybe one automated rejection email 3 months later from a no-reply address.
If they're lucky.
Right. And they hear nothing else. People are genuinely starting to wonder if they are uniquely unhireable. Is it just a perception problem, or is the actual, underlying math of cold applying really this hostile?
The math is entirely hostile. Honestly, it's a statistical trap.
A trap. Okay, break that down for me.
If you're sitting at your desk hitting easy apply on LinkedIn or, filling out those endless proprietary online forms on company websites, you really need to understand the sheer numerical weight you're up against.
It's heavy.
Very heavy. On average, the data shows it takes submitting anywhere from 32 to over 200 applications just to receive a single job offer.
Wait, hold on. 200 applications.
Up to 200, yeah. Only 0.1% to 2% of cold online applications ever lead to an offer.
I want to make sure I'm doing that math right. At 0.1%, you could sit down, meticulously fill out 1,000 applications, and statistically, you are only guaranteed one single job offer.
That is the reality of the volume game right now. Because the friction to apply has been reduced to practically zero, the volume has just skyrocketed.
Because everyone is just mass applying.
Exactly. Many standard corporate job postings right now are receiving 250 or more applications within the first 48 hours.
Wow. 2 days, 250 people.
Yeah. And out of those 250 applications, the hiring manager is only going to actually interview about 4 to 6 people.
That's what, like 2%?
Roughly 2% of the applicant pool even gets a phone screen. When you click apply, you are immediately entering a lottery where 98% of the tickets are swept into the trash before the drawing even happens.
So playing the online job board game is essentially a tax on the uninformed.
That's a great way to put it.
But let's look at the mechanism doing the sweeping. We really have to talk about the ATS, the applicant tracking system.
Oh, yes.
The boogeyman, the ultimate boogeyman of the modern job search. The prevailing fear is that there's this highly intelligent, ruthless AI robot guarding the gate, and it's just auto-rejecting everyone who doesn't use the exact right synonym for synergy.
Right, which isn't exactly true.
But people are desperate to beat it. Have you seen the white text hack people talk about online?
Oh, you mean the tactic where candidates copy and paste the entire job description into the footer of their resume and change the font color to white?
That's the one. I mean, the logic is that a human HR rep won't see it because it blends into the white background of the document, but the ATS machine reads the hidden text, registers a 100% keyword match, and pushes you to the top of the pile.
Yeah, it's everywhere on TikTok.
Does any of this actually work? Are these systems really auto-rejecting us based on these hyper-specific keyword algorithms?
We really need to pull back the curtain on the ATS because the reality is much less sophisticated and honestly much more frustrating than a Terminator-style AI.
Okay, lay it on me.
First, the adoption rate is basically universal. 98% of Fortune 500 companies use an ATS.
Basically everyone.
Right. Over 90% of all employers use some form of automated filtering. And the terrifying statistic is actually accurate. Up to 75% of resumes get filtered out before a human ever lays eyes on them.
75%? That's brutal.
It is, but it's rarely an intelligent judgment call that gets you rejected.
Wow.
In a massive number of cases, it is simply a mechanical parsing failure.
Break down what a parsing failure actually means for the listener. Like, if I upload my resume, what is the software mechanically doing that causes it to fail?
You have to think of an ATS not as an AI evaluating your worth, but as basically a glorified digital filing cabinet with a very rigid optical character recognition, or OCR, scanner.
Okay, so just scanning for tags.
Exactly. It's programmed to extract your text and dump it into specific rigid fields in a database. First name, last name, education, experience, skills.
Sounds simple enough.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
The problem is these parsers read strictly left to right, top to bottom.
Okay.
So if you use a modern two-column resume design, maybe you have your job titles on the left and your employment dates on the right, the ATS doesn't understand that visual boundary.
Oh no, so it just reads straight across.
It reads straight across the invisible line. It will combine your job title with a random date, mash it into a paragraph of your skills, and output absolute gibberish.
That's awful.
And then the system evaluates that gibberish, determines you lack the required experience, and just auto-rejects you. Fully 23% of all ATS rejections are purely because of these formatting and parsing errors.
Let me process that. So the graphic designer who spends an entire weekend crafting this beautifully formatted multi-column resume with custom icons and a sleek layout.
They're actively sabotaging their own career prospects.
Simply because the software is too primitive to read it.
They are essentially guaranteeing their own rejection. And it gets worse. If you put a photo or a headshot on your resume, you are looking at an 88% rejection rate in many legacy systems.
88%, just for a picture.
Because the image file completely scrambles the text extraction process, the ATS just spits out an error code, and the overworked recruiter simply moves on to the next candidate in the queue rather than trying to decipher your corrupted file.
They just don't have the time to fix it.
Not at all. And as for that white text hack circulating on social media, it is one of the most self-destructive things you can do.
Because the software catches it. Or flags it as spam.
Because the software strips all visual formatting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The ATS does not render color, fonts, or margins. It extracts the raw text and presents it in a standardized plain text profile to the recruiter.
So the recruiter just sees it.
When the hiring manager opens your file, they don't see your clever hidden trick. They see your standard resume, followed by a massive, glaring block of nonsensical, repetitive keywords dumped right at the bottom of the screen.
That is so embarrassing.
It immediately exposes you as a candidate who is trying to manipulate the system. Your credibility is destroyed in a fraction of a second, and you are manually rejected.
So to summarize this nightmare, the front door gives you a 0.1% statistical chance of an offer.
Yeah.
And the digital bouncer guarding that door, the ATS, is blind, rigid, easily confused by a table, and tosses out 75% of applicants based on administrative technicalities.
That's the reality of cold applying, yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. If the application portal is essentially a shredder, and 250 people are fighting a broken algorithm for every single job, where are the actual hires coming from? How are these companies actually functioning and acquiring talent?
70 to 85%, and I'll pause there to let that sink in. 70 to 85% of jobs are filled through networking and are never posted publicly.
Wow.
That is the load-bearing data point of this entire discussion. The vast majority of available roles in the 2026 economy make up the hidden job market.
So if your entire strategy consists of applying on job boards, you're fighting 99% of the global candidate pool for, what, at best, 15 to 30% of the visible market?
Exactly, you're fighting for scraps.
I have to put on my skeptical hat here and look at this from the business side. If I'm running a company, why on earth would I hide my open jobs? Doesn't that artificially restrict my talent pool? Keeping positions secret sounds incredibly inefficient.
It sounds inefficient until you factor in the cost of attention. For a hiring manager, keeping a job off the public boards is a critical risk mitigation strategy.
Risk mitigation. From what? Just too many emails?
From an absolute avalanche of noise. Public postings are chaotic. If a director of marketing posts a role publicly on a Tuesday, by Thursday, they are buried under thousands of resumes.
Right, because of the zero-friction applications.
Exactly. The vast majority of those applicants are completely unqualified, many are geographically incompatible, and a growing percentage are using AI to mass apply to hundreds of jobs a day. The signal-to-noise ratio is terrible, and it just paralyzes the HR department.
They are hiding the jobs simply to protect their own time capital. It's a defense mechanism against the spam.
And the data shows something even more cynical happening on those public job boards.
Oh, here we go.
Up to 40% of hiring managers admit to keeping ghost jobs active on their career sites.
Ghost jobs, meaning what exactly?
These are listings for roles that do not actually exist or that they have absolutely no intention of filling.
Why leave them up? That seems pointless.
Several reasons. Sometimes they leave them up to build a speculative talent pool for the future. You know, just collecting resumes.
Like farming data.
Right. Sometimes it's a branding exercise to make the company appear to investors like it is in a period of aggressive growth.
Look at us. We're hiring for 50 roles. We must be doing great.
Exactly. But most often, it's used to placate overworked internal teams, giving them the illusion that management is actively trying to hire help.
That is deeply unethical. You have desperate job seekers spending hours researching a company and writing custom cover letters for a phantom position.
Which is exactly why you have to bypass that ecosystem entirely. The real hiring, the actual placement of human beings into critical roles, happens through the trust premium.
The trust premium. I like that phrase.
When a team leader realizes they need to hire an engineer, their first instinct is not to draft a public job description. Their first instinct is to turn to their senior developer and ask, who do you know from your last company?
Right, because they trust that senior developer.
They rely on internal mobility and employee referrals to source vetted talent before the public ever finds out the budget was approved.
Let's translate this for the listener. If the visible market is a rigged game, what is the actual mathematical advantage of being the person who gets recommended through that side door?
The return on investment for being referred is just staggering. Let's look at the funnel. Referrals typically make up only 6 to 7% of the total applicant pool for any given enterprise company.
Okay, so a tiny fraction of the people applying.
Yet, that tiny 6% sliver accounts for 30 to 50% of all successful hires.
Just to isolate that, 6% of the people applying are walking away with half of the jobs.
It's incredible, right? Look at the internal data from a massive consulting firm like Booz Allen Hamilton. They publicly attribute 55% of all their enterprise hires directly to employee referrals.
Over half.
If you enter the hiring pipeline backed by an internal referral, your statistical probability of being hired is anywhere from 4 to 15 times higher than a candidate who applies cold through the website.
The asymmetry there is wild.
Right.
But beyond just getting the job, does it change the actual friction of the hiring process? Like, does the interview gauntlet get any easier?
Significantly easier and much faster. As a referred candidate, you bypass the initial algorithmic screening and often skip the first-round HR phone screen entirely.
So you skip the ATS shredder completely.
You're right past it. You are hired up to 55% faster. The average time to hire for a traditional applicant is hovering around 39 days of waiting, interviewing, and silence. For a referred candidate, that timeline compresses to 29 days or less.
That 10-day difference is huge when you're unemployed.
Absolutely. And from the corporate perspective, they are heavily incentivized to hire you this way. They save an average of $1,000 to $3,500 per hire in advertising costs, sourcing software, and recruiter hours.
So it's a win-win. The company saves thousands of dollars, the hiring manager doesn't have to sift through 250 broken ATS resumes, and they get someone who is already somewhat vetted.
And they get a demonstrably better employee long-term. The retention data proves the model works. 45% of referred hires remain with the company for over 4 years.
Wow, almost half stay that long. What's the rate for regular applicants?
If you compare that to job board hires, only 25% survive to that 4-year mark. Referred employees stay 70% longer overall, and their internal performance reviews are rated up to 33% higher.
Well, think about the psychology of that.
Yeah.
If I recommend you for a job on my team, I am putting my own professional reputation on the line.
Exactly.
I am spending my political capital. I am not going to refer someone who's going to miss deadlines and make me look like an idiot to my boss.
Exactly the point. The referral is a transfer of trust.
Okay, the assessment phase of this deep dive is crystal clear. The visible job market is a trap, and the hidden job market access through networking is the only statistically viable way to manage a career in 2026.
Without a doubt.
But this leads us to a massive practical problem. If I am listening to this and I realize I need to get referred, my immediate logical thought is, great, I will just text my 3 best friends, ask if their departments are hiring, and I'll have a job by Friday.
Right.
I leveraged my tightest circle.
It is the most common assumption, and it is entirely wrong.
Really? Why wouldn't I ask my best friends?
To understand why your best friends are actually the worst people to help you find a job, we have to look at the underlying science of human networks. This brings us to a foundational sociological theory published in 1973 by a Stanford researcher named Mark Granovetter. The paper is famous in academic circles. It's called The Strength of Weak Ties.
The strength of weak ties, not strong ties. Break that down, because it feels completely backwards. Why would a weak relationship be stronger for my career?
Well, Granovetter essentially wanted to map how information, specifically information about new jobs, flowed through society. He surveyed hundreds of professionals in the Boston area to trace exactly how they found their current employment. The prevailing assumption at the time was that close friends and family, your strong ties, would be the most helpful because they care about you the most and have the highest motivation to see you succeed.
Which makes sense emotionally.
Emotionally, yes. But Granovetter found the exact opposite. The vast majority of people secured their jobs through casual acquaintances, people they saw occasionally or had worked with years prior.
That's fascinating. Why?
To understand why, we have to introduce a concept called network density or homophily. Think about your strong ties. Your closest friends, your current coworkers, your spouse, you all spend significant time together. You read the same news, you complain about the same industry trends, you know the exact same people.
Right. We're all in the same bubble.
From an information network standpoint, your strong ties are highly redundant.
I like to think of strong ties like living in a cul-de-sac.
Oh, that's a good way to picture it.
It's a very tight, safe community.
Mhm.
Everyone knows everyone. But because you are all in the same cul-de-sac, you all hear the same neighborhood gossip at the exact same time.
Right.
If a house goes up for sale on your street, you already know about it. Your best friends can't bring you new information because they are breathing the exact same air you are.
That is a perfect structural analogy. You are trapped in an information bubble. Your weak ties, however, the former vendor you collaborated with 3 years ago, the person you chatted with at a seminar, a friend of a friend, they act as highway on-ramps.
The highway on-ramps out of the cul-de-sac.
Exactly. They bridge the gap between your cul-de-sac and entirely different cities. They sit in different social circles, work at different companies, and have access to completely non-redundant information.
So they see things you can't see.
They are the ones who can see the hidden job market that is invisible to your immediate circle.
Conceptually, the highway on-ramp makes total sense. But we have to acknowledge that Granovetter was doing this research in 1973. People were finding jobs in the newspaper classifieds. They were typing resumes on IBM Selectrics.
Yeah, very different world.
Does a 50-year-old sociological theory about Boston professionals actually survive contact with modern, hyper-connected digital algorithms?
The data shows something incredible. It doesn't just survive, it has been definitively proven at a scale Granovetter could never have comprehended.
Oh, this is the LinkedIn study, right?
Yes. And this is where we bring in the 2022 mega study conducted by a coalition of researchers from MIT, Harvard, Stanford, and LinkedIn. If you care about your career trajectory, this is arguably the most important piece of labor market research published this century.
I remember when this study dropped. The sheer volume of data they had access to was staggering.
It was completely unprecedented. The researchers analyzed the data of 20 million LinkedIn users over a 5-year period.
20 million. That's a huge sample size.
Massive. To put that in perspective, they were tracking the formation of 2 billion new digital ties and monitoring over 600,000 actual job changes.
So they weren't just guessing, they were watching it happen in real time.
But here's what makes this study groundbreaking. They didn't just passively observe the data. They essentially ran a massive multi-year randomized controlled trial, an A/B test, right under our noses.
Wait, they actively manipulated how people network?
They tweaked LinkedIn's People You May Know algorithm, that sidebar that suggests new connections to you.
Yeah, I see that every time I log in.
Right. So they divided those 20 million users into different randomized cohorts. For some users, the algorithm heavily recommended adding strong ties people with whom the user already shared dozens of mutual connections.
Keeping them in the cul-de-sac.
Exactly. For other cohorts, the algorithm purposely suggested weak ties people with whom the user shared almost zero mutual connections.
So they artificially injected different types of network density into people's feeds to see if it actually caused them to get hired elsewhere.
Precisely. They were hunting for causal evidence, not just a neat correlation. They wanted to prove that the structure of your network directly dictates your economic mobility.
And what did they find?
The results provided undeniable empirical proof. Increasing your weak ties absolutely causes an increase in job mobility.
So Granovetter was right all along.
He was, but the algorithm revealed a massive twist to his original theory. They discovered a phenomenon they termed the inverted U-shape.
An inverted U-shape. Let's visualize that. What does that actually mean for the listener who is trying to figure out who to message on LinkedIn today?
If you plot tie strength on an axis from total strangers on the left to your absolute best friends on the right, the job-finding benefit does not just go up in a straight line. It forms a bell curve.
Okay, so a bump in the middle.
The peak of that curve, the absolute highest statistical probability of a connection leading to a new job, sits right in the middle. The sweet spot is what the researchers defined as moderately weak ties.
Moderately weak. How do we translate that academic term into the real world? How many mutual connections is moderately weak?
Structurally, the data pinpointed the maximum benefit at connections where you share roughly 10 mutual contacts.
Just 10.
Yeah. If you share 50 or 100 mutual connections, the tie is too strong. You are back in the cul-de-sac. The information is totally redundant, and they can't offer you anything new.
And on the flip side,
On the other end of the spectrum, if you share 0 mutual connections, the tie is too weak. There is no foundational trust.
right, because why would a complete stranger stick their neck out for me?
Exactly. If you cold message a total stranger with 0 shared context, they have 0 incentive to put their reputation on the line to refer you to their boss.
But the people in the middle.
But a moderately weak tie, say, a former project manager from 2 jobs ago, or someone who graduated from your university's specific degree program a year before you did, they hit the perfect balance.
Because they know you, but not too well.
They have just enough shared context to trust you, but they sit in a completely different professional ecosystem and have access to a completely different hidden job market. That is your gold mine.
That distinction is vital. The total stranger is too weak, the college roommate is too strong, the acquaintance is the key. But I want to push back on the universality of this. If I'm a machine learning engineer building AI models in Silicon Valley versus a supply chain manager at a legacy paper mill in Ohio, does this moderately weak tie rule apply equally to both of us? Those are two very different worlds.
It's an excellent question, and the MIT researchers actually isolated that exact variable. The answer is a definitive no.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they uncovered a secondary layer to the data, which we can call the information velocity hypothesis. The effectiveness of your networking strategy depends entirely on the speed of the industry you operate in.
Break down the mechanics of that. Why does industry speed change the value of a connection?
In fast-moving, highly digital and dynamic industries, think artificial intelligence, software development, digital marketing, the half-life of information is incredibly short.
Things change every week.
New coding frameworks, new startups, and new methodologies pop up overnight. In those high-velocity sectors, weak ties are absolutely critical for survival. You desperately need that constant influx of novel outside information from the highway on-ramps just to spot emerging opportunities before your skills become obsolete.
Because if you only talk to your 5 closest engineer friends, you might all be doubling down on a technology that the rest of the industry abandoned 3 months ago.
Exactly the risk. But the study found the inverse is true in traditional, less digital industries.
Like the paper mill.
If you are in heavy manufacturing, traditional corporate finance, or legacy healthcare administration, the rate of technological disruption is much slower. The processes are entrenched.
So novel information isn't as valuable there.
In those low-velocity environments, the premium is not on discovering novel information. The premium is on deep trust, reliability, and intense personal vetting. Therefore, in traditional industries, strong ties still hold the majority of the power when it comes to hiring.
That is a fascinating nuance. You have to audit the velocity of your own industry before you decide how wide to cast your net.
Absolutely.
But look, dissecting sociological network theory and algorithmic A/B testing is great for a textbook. Actually executing this in the real world is an entirely different beast. I want to shift us into beat 3. Strategy. We have to address the massive psychological elephant in the room.
The networking confidence gap.
Exactly. I was looking at a survey recently. 84% of job seekers fundamentally know that networking is important. They aren't ignorant to the fact that relationships matter.
Sure.
But 59% of them admit they have absolutely no idea where to begin. And when you look at Gen Z, the demographic just entering this brutal market, 51% feel completely underprepared to build professional relationships.
Which is completely understandable given how digital their lives have been.
Right. And for a massive portion of the population, networking just feels inherently slimy. It feels transactional, manipulative, and desperate. It feels like you are just using people as stepping stones to get a paycheck. How do we bridge this psychological confidence gap so people can actually use the data we just talked about?
We have to completely tear down and reframe the definition of networking.
Yeah.
If you feel slimy doing it, or if it feels transactional, you are fundamentally doing it wrong.
Okay, so what is the right way?
Networking is not sending a LinkedIn message begging a stranger for a favor. It is not asking, hey, can you give me a job? Real networking is a reciprocal value exchange. It is the process of building professional capital long before you ever need to spend it.
Building it before you need it. I like that.
And tactically, overcoming this gap requires a massive reallocation of how you spend your time during a job hunt. You need to immediately adopt an 80-20 strategy.
80-20. Walk me through the resource allocation there.
You should be spending 80% of your job search hours cultivating relationships, uncovering the hidden job market, and having conversations. You should only be spending 20% of your time tailoring resumes and throwing them into the ATS shredder.
Which is the exact opposite of what most people do.
Most job seekers have that ratio entirely inverted. They spend 40 hours a week tweaking keywords in isolation and maybe send one hesitant email to a former colleague as an afterthought.
Okay, let's say I'm sold. I'm flipping my ratio to 80-20 starting tomorrow. If I am staring at my phone right now, anticipating that anxiety, give me a framework. How do I actually audit and categorize the hundreds of random contacts in my life?
We can organize the chaos using a 3-tier network audit framework. Think of your network as a heat map or concentric circles.
Okay, I'm visualizing a target.
Tier 1 is the inner circle. These are your strong ties, your close friends, immediate family, and the colleagues you share a desk with every single day.
These are the people who will definitely answer my text. But as we learned from Granovetter, they don't know anything I don't already know. They are in the cul-de-sac.
Right. Tier 1 is essential for your mental health and emotional support during the brutal rejection cycles of a job search. They are fantastic when you need a high-trust character reference, but they are not your primary engine for new leads.
So I shouldn't rely on them for the actual job offer.
No. You need to focus 80% of your outreach energy on Tier 2. This is the moderately weak tie goldmine.
Who falls into Tier 2?
We are talking about former colleagues from 2 jobs ago, college alumni who graduated a year before you and work in your city, people you had a great conversation with at a trade show last year. These are the people with whom you share roughly 10 mutual connections.
And just to complete the map, Tier 3 would be the absolute weakest ties, the complete strangers.
Tier 3 is the outer ring. The hiring managers at your target companies who you have absolutely zero mutual connections with. Reaching out to Tier 3 completely cold has a very low conversion rate. It puts you right back in the 0.1% lottery pool.
So what do we do about Tier 3?
To penetrate Tier 3, you have to attract them to you using a document-first content strategy, which we will break down shortly, but your immediate action item has to be activating Tier 2.
Let's camp out on Tier 2 for a minute, because this is where the friction happens. This is where the ick factor stops people in their tracks.
Definitely.
I have a list of 20 former colleagues. I haven't spoken to them in 3 years. I cannot just text them out of the blue and say, Hey, Susan, long time no see. I just got laid off. Can you get me a job at Google?
No, please don't do that.
If I do that, I sound desperate and I burn the bridge instantly. What is the psychological mechanism to warm them up without being awkward?
You avoid the awkwardness by removing the transaction entirely. You treat this outreach like a top-of-funnel sales strategy. You reach out to request an informational interview with zero expectation of a job offer.
Informational interview.
Your only stated goal is to gather information about their career path and reestablish a human connection.
Role play that for me. What does that message actually look like when I type it out?
It is entirely anchored in professional curiosity. It looks like this. Hi, Susan. It's been a while since we worked together at Company X. I saw on LinkedIn that you recently transitioned into product management at Google. I'm currently exploring a similar pivot in my own career, and I'd love to hear how you manage that transition into big tech. Do you have 15 minutes for a virtual coffee sometime next Tuesday?
Notice what you didn't do there. You didn't attach a resume. You didn't mention open roles. You just asked for advice.
Yeah.
And human beings are incredibly vain. We love giving advice.
We do. You are validating her expertise. You are signaling that you respect her trajectory. And the data behind this specific funnel is just astonishing.
Let's hear the numbers.
When job seekers actively build relationships using this non-transactional method, 71% report a positive outcome for their career.
71%. That's a massive success rate.
Let's break down the actual conversion rates of the informational interview funnel. Out of the people who engage your Tier 2 contacts this way, 39% end up receiving a direct, unsolicited referral from that contact.
Stop there. Almost 40% of the time, the person you are having coffee with volunteers to refer you without you even having to beg for it.
Yes, because once they hear your story and vet your competence during the chat, they realize they can solve their boss's hiring problem and maybe score a referral bonus.
Oh, right. Referral bonuses are huge right now.
Exactly. From that 39% who get referred, 36% secure a formal interview with the company, and ultimately 32% receive a concrete job offer.
I want to juxtapose those numbers so the reality of this sinks in. 32% of people who utilize the informational interview funnel get a job offer.
Yeah.
If we contrast that with the 0.1% offer rate of cold applying on a job board,
It's not even a comparison.
you are literally hundreds of times more likely to get hired if you buy Susan a virtual coffee and listen to her talk about her career than if you spend 3 weeks optimizing your resume font for an ATS scanner. The mathematical superiority of the side door is absolute.
It really is.
But I want to pivot to Tier 3 and the digital landscape. We live our professional lives on LinkedIn. We don't always have a Susan in our contacts list to email. If I want to break into a new company, how do I navigate the platform to bypass the application pile when I am starting from zero?
The absolute worst action you can take on LinkedIn is clicking the easy apply button and passively waiting.
Right, because that puts you in the shredder.
You have to use the platform algorithmically to signal your expertise, which attracts those Tier 3 strangers and slowly converts them into Tier 2 weak ties. The current data indicates that the most effective format for doing this in 2026 is through document or carousel content.
Why document specifically? Why not just write a thoughtful text post or share a link to an article?
It comes down to how the platform monetizes attention. The algorithm heavily prioritizes dwell time, the amount of seconds a user stops scrolling to look at a post.
Makes sense. They want to keep you on the app.
Text posts are schemed in 2 seconds. External links take people off the platform, so the algorithm suppresses them.
It buries the links.
Exactly. But a multi-page PDF document or a swipeable carousel forces the user to stop, click, and physically swipe through multiple pages. It maximizes dwell time.
So the algorithm rewards you for that.
Heavily. Because of this, document formats are currently being rewarded with massive organic reach, boasting engagement rates between 7 to 21%.
That's huge reach. So what kind of documents should people post?
If you are a supply chain analyst, don't just put supply chain analyst in your headline. Publish a 5-slide carousel breaking down the impact of a recent global shipping bottleneck.
You are demonstrating your competence in public. You are showing the hidden job market how you think, rather than just telling them what you've done.
And tactically, you use this to build bridges. When you identify a company you want to work for, you do not apply on their portal. You use LinkedIn's search function to find the internal recruiter or the specific hiring manager for that team.
Okay, so you target them specifically.
You study their profile. You engage thoughtfully with their content over a few weeks. You leave insightful comments. You're artificially establishing a moderately weak tie, building familiarity before you ever send a direct message mentioning the open role.
You are essentially reverse engineering the MIT study. You are turning a useless Tier 3 stranger into a highly valuable Tier 2 moderately weak tie, purely through digital proximity.
Exactly. You're building the bridge before you cross it.
I want to take a massive philosophical shift here as we move into Beat 4, because the title of this show is Surviving AI. We cover the technological disruption of the labor market. And the landscape we are looking at is increasingly synthetic.
Extremely synthetic.
87% of enterprise companies are currently utilizing AI at some stage in their hiring funnel. They use language models to draft the job descriptions, and they use algorithms to screen the inbound resumes.
And candidates are doing the exact same thing on their end.
Right. Candidates are adapting. They are using ChatGPT and Claude to write their cover letters, generate bullet points, and perfectly mirror the keywords in the job description.
Which creates a huge problem.
We are rapidly approaching a closed loop. The candidate's bot is perfectly optimizing an application to submit to the employer's bot, which is perfectly scanning for those optimizations. It's an endless feedback loop of synthetic noise. In a world where AI is talking to AI, what is the value of the human being in 2026?
This is the climax of everything we have discussed today. We call this the AI inversion insight. It is arguably the most critical paradigm shift any professional needs to internalize right now.
Break that down. What is the AI inversion?
For the last 20 years, the labor market was a meritocracy of execution. We competed on our hard skills. Could you write better code? Could you generate tighter financial models? Could you write more persuasive copy?
Right. It was about what you could produce.
But as artificial intelligence completely commoditizes the execution of those tasks, hard skills are no longer your primary differentiator.
Because the AI can do the task faster and cheaper.
Exactly. If an AI can instantly generate a resume that perfectly mimics the profile of a top-tier candidate, the document itself loses all semantic meaning. How does an employer actually know who is competent and who just has a good prompting strategy?
They don't. They really don't. The resume, as mechanism for proving your worth, is basically dead. It is a low-fidelity signal in a high-noise environment.
The resume is completely debased. In a market drowning in AI-generated synthetic competence, the only high-fidelity signal of talent remaining is human trust.
Human trust.
This is the AI inversion. Artificial intelligence is not making human networking obsolete. It is making it exponentially more valuable. The technological advancement of the machine has forced a regression to the oldest form of human commerce, the handshake.
That's incredibly powerful.
A human being looking at another human being and vouching for their character is the ultimate premium currency in the 2026 labor economy.
I want to take a second to really underline that, because the fear narrative out there is that AI is replacing us. But the reality is that AI makes your relationships more valuable.
Absolutely.
An algorithm cannot replicate the weight of a former manager saying, I was in the trenches with this person at 2 a.m. on a Saturday trying to hit a deadline, and they kept their head, solved the problem, and did not let the team down.
No bot can hallucinate that.
That lived, shared human experience, that verification of your resilience and character is the one data point the machine cannot fake.
And that is why the hidden job market is expanding. It isn't just a quirk of HR efficiency anymore. Relying on referrals is the corporate world's primary defense mechanism against the flood of AI-generated spam.
So if you want to survive the AI labor market, you can no longer rely on your ability to execute tasks. You have to become undeniable within the human network.
You have to be known, and you have to be trusted.
We know the hostile math of the job boards. We understand the sociological science of moderately weak ties. We grasp the philosophical shift of the AI inversion. Now, we really need the blueprint. We need to put this into action.
It's time to build the engine.
If someone is listening to this right now, feeling overwhelmed by everything they have been doing wrong, how do they pivot today? Give us the 30-day activation plan. What are the concrete step-by-step actions they take over the next month to crack open the hidden job market?
Think of this as a 4-week sprint to completely rewire your career infrastructure. Week 1 is entirely dedicated to the audit.
The audit, meaning I'm just looking at my contacts.
You do not send a single message this week. You sit down with a spreadsheet, you go through your phone contacts, your LinkedIn connections, your old email archives, and your university alumni database.
What am I looking for?
Your goal is to identify and map out 20 to 30 people who fit the exact criteria of a moderately weak tie. You are looking for people with whom you have shared context, but who sit in different professional ecosystems.
So week 1 is just building the target list. It's low pressure, just mapping the highway on-ramps. What happens in week 2?
Week 2 is value outreach. You begin contacting the people on your list, but you must adhere to a strict rule. Under no circumstances do you mention that you are looking for a job.
Not even a hint.
Not even a hint. Your only goal is to warm up the connection. You send a brief message sharing a piece of relevant industry news. Or you congratulate them on a recent project launch you noticed on their profile.
Just keeping it light.
Right. Hey, Mark, I saw your team just shipped the Q3 update. The UI looks incredible. Hope you're doing well.
You are paying the radar. You are reminding them that you exist in a positive light without making any demands on their time or energy.
Exactly. Then, week 3 is where you escalate the engagement. This is the informational interviews phase.
Going for the virtual coffee.
Out of the 20 people you warmed up, you reach back out to 5 or 10 of them and ask for a 15-minute virtual coffee. Again, you are not asking them to hire you. You frame it around their expertise.
I'd love to hear how you navigated your first year as a director. Something like that.
Perfect. During that call, you ask thoughtful questions, you listen 80% of the time, and you let them talk about their own journey.
And inevitably, at the end of that call, social reciprocity dictates that they will ask, so what are you up to right now?
They always do.
But let's move to week 4. When do we actually get to leverage this for a job?
Week 4 is the ask, but it is a highly strategic, soft ask. Once you have established rapport during that informational interview, and only if the conversation flowed naturally, you ask for visibility, not a favor.
Visibility, how do I phrase that?
You do not ask, can you hire me? Instead, you ask, based on my background and what we just discussed, if you see any opportunities in your broader network that might be a fit, would you mind keeping me in mind?
That's a great way to put it. No pressure on them.
Or, if you already know their company has an opening, you ask for intel. I actually saw a posting for a senior analyst on your marketing team. Do you have any insight into what the hiring manager is actually looking for beyond the standard bullet points in the job description?
Think about the elegance of that approach. You are asking for intelligence, not a handout. You are respecting their boundaries.
And because you spent the last 3 weeks building trust and validating their expertise, the statistical probability is incredibly high that they will respond with, send me your resume, I'll bypass the system and forward it directly to the hiring manager.
And just like that, you are in. You completely bypass the ATS parsing errors. You bypass the 250 cold applicants fighting for attention. You have officially entered the 30 to 50% referral hiring bracket.
You have accessed the hidden job market. And if you run that 30-day playbook consistently, rotating through new batches of your Tier 2 connections every month, you build an engine. You will never have to blindly submit a resume to a digital shredder again.
This has been an incredibly clarifying session. We started by looking at a system that feels uniquely designed to break our spirits. The illusion of the apply button, the 75% automatic rejection rate, the avalanche of synthetic spam.
It's a bleak system for sure.
But what the data reveals is that the power in the job market hasn't disappeared. It has simply shifted locations. The jobs are still there. The budgets are still there. They are just hidden safely behind the protective barrier of moderately weak ties.
Trust is everything now.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Think about the massive career leap you are hoping for right now. The higher salary, the better title, the remote flexibility. What if the person who holds the direct key to that opportunity is someone already sitting in your phone contacts right now? Someone you haven't spoken to in 3 years, who's just waiting for a text. The hidden job market isn't permanently locked. You just haven't turned the handle.
Text 5 people this weekend. People you've lost touch with. No agenda. Just reconnection.
Next time on Surviving AI, Episode 17, the side business insurance policy. Your job might disappear in 18 months. Your side business could be earning $3,000 per month by then. It's not Plan B anymore. It's Plan A insurance.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time on Surviving AI.